So this Kawhi Leonard situation just won't quit, man. I talked about it a few months ago, and I figured I wouldn't have to make another video on it because it would just kind of resolve itself. It has definitely not resolved itself, and seems like it's gotten even deeper. I know recently, I think CJ McCollum said that he is doubting if Kawhi is going to be on the team moving forward. A lot of NBA people share that sentiment. And I think what's interesting is, in the last couple of months, it seems like there's been a disdain that has developed for the Spurs towards Kawhi. Maybe not in the sense of disliking him, but in the sense of like, come on, dude. And we've seen that through Tony Parker's comment about I had the same injury but 100 times worse, and I believe Manu has said something about just, I don't know, being a Spur or something like that. There's definitely an age gap with this thing as we're seeing Kawhi following the footsteps of LeBron, Kyrie Irving, making your own path, you know, with being a younger star player. So what the hell happens? What happens in this situation? Well, the first thing we got to talk about is that for all of the problems that has potentially developed between Kawhi and the Spurs in terms of Popovich being kind of tired of the situation and doing his sideways comment to LaMarcus Aldridge about LaMarcus Aldridge, where he said, oh, it's so good that he comes in every day and all that. Kawhi may still be on this team just because the amount of money that the Spurs can offer him is obscene with the Mega Max thing that the NBA introduced a couple years ago. Is it a guarantee they offer it? I don't know. I mean, if there's any team in the NBA where it's the coach over the player, it's probably this one. Because we've seen star player versus coach things before, and almost always the star player wins. The one that my brain immediately went to was Darren Williams and Jerry Sloan. Popovich has 5 titles, though. And this is also not the original Spurs. Like, I feel like Popovich is going to be more beloved in San Antonio, more beloved by the fans, the organization, so I don't think the people would turn on you if you decided to either trade this guy or you decided to let him walk. I mean, would the basketball nerds of the world, aka me and like the people watching this video, give them crap for it? Of course we would, because we're like, dude, he's one of the best players in the league. But I don't think the same sentiment would be there for the Spurs community as a whole, which I think helps a situation like this if you're the Spurs organization and you're just kind of done with this whole thing. But at the same time, I don't think we should assume that they're just checked out on Kawhi. That's just one possibility. But let's say he does return. Let's say this manages to resolve itself somewhat, and he is back on this team and he's like on the floor. The quad is not causing him problems. I would be pretty excited to see that team. Mainly him and DeJounte Murray just being a defensive nightmare. Because while I think offensively DeJounte's got some work to do, he's really good on defense, man. He's like 6'5", he moves well, he gets up on guys, and between Kawhi, DeJounte, and Danny Green, who I think's gotten a little bit worse, and he may not be on the Spurs after next season, but still pretty above average, I would say. And there's a chance he could bounce back to being like top 5 perimeter defender or whatever. That's like kind of murderer's row on the perimeter for defense. And with the way Popovich has managed to have them be such a good defensive team with Pau Gasol and LaMarcus Aldridge, I mean, that would be something to watch those three. And I think that's the kind of team who would have a real chance against the Warriors and the Rockets and all that. So from a basketball viewing standpoint, the best option here is this situation fixes itself, right? But let's look at it from the other direction, which is it does not fix itself. What's a realistic move for the Spurs? It would be to trade him, because the player option, well, he's going to decline it, so he's effectively on a 1-year contract at this point, being the 2019 season. So that would be the realm of, like, depends on what team you trade him to and all that. His agent and him have to decide if he would actually re-sign with that team. And that creates some complications, right? But it also creates the idea of the Spurs, their resources being kind of chopped in half, because you can't just freely trade him to anyone, you know? So there's a chance that if they were going to move him, they would not get back that beautiful return for the guy, you know? I know I was listening to the Bill Simmons pod, and Bill presented this same scenario where he's not going to go everywhere, like he's going to tell bad teams that I'm not going to re-sign with you, and Bill brought up the idea of him ending up on the Clippers for like Tobias Harris, the 12th pick, the 13th pick, and a future like lottery protected pick or whatever. I mean, I would like to think you can find something better than that, but I mean, I feel like that is within the realm of being realistic with this trade. I mean, if Kawhi Leonard had 2 years left on his deal, then you could get like a lot back for the guy, like a lot back. But given this, it's not perfect. I think the other team that you always have to think about whenever a star becomes available is the Celtics, right? The problem with the Celtics is they don't have a contract that they'd actually want to trade. Like, it's all max contracts and rookie deals. There's no, like, $10 million guy to make it work. And I don't think they want to trade Horford, and I don't think they want to trade Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, and Spurs probably don't want Horford anyway. So that one would be interesting. I mean, they still got picks, man. They've got the pick that's going to end up being the Kings selection, unless it's number 1, and I actually don't know what happens to it. There is that Grizzlies protected pick that gets better every season. So there's them. The Lakers are definitely a team, whether they be willing to move Ingram or whatever. But all this only happens if the Spurs are pretty confident that he's just not going to come back. That's the only way I would do it. I have to imagine they would not get to the point where they say, you know what, we don't want this top 6 player on our team anymore. It would have to be that he doesn't want to be on your team anymore. And I actually kind of want to go deeper into the idea of if Kawhi was not on this team, what would that do to the Spurs? Well, number one, I don't know how much more time Popovich really has locked in here. I mean, Tony Parker's deal is done after this season. Manu, his is up after next year. So he might bounce once those two are gone. I could picture that happening. I also don't know if I can picture Popovich embracing a rebuild kind of a team. I should say, they did manage to win pretty well this season given Kawhi being gone, but they still cap out at like a 46 win team or so. I feel like the smart thing to do would be to embrace the young dudes in that situation, and I don't know if Pop would be totally for that. Just given, how long has it been where he's been in at least the conference finals, NBA finals, 50-something plus wins every year? Like, it's been a long time, And he also just might not be the type of guy who can just deal with constant mistakes from young players, I think he can deal with it when it's DeJounte and then everybody around him is a veteran, but if it's like a team full of 24-year-olds who mess up all the time, his head might explode. As for the personnel, if Kawhi was gone, if you were forced to trade him, I assume you'd get a decent return back in terms of young players and draft picks. Lakers coming to mind on that one. So you've got that. You would embrace DeJounte, and from there on, you would just have to be the Spurs in terms of hiring the right guy for the coach, which I'm sure they would do, or they would take on one of the assistants, because I'm sure that a number of Pop's assistants would be a fine coach. We've seen it with Budenholzer already. And then you would just have to find the next big-time player, which this team has always been good at finding guys out of nowhere. Danny Green wasn't doing much in Cleveland. They scooped him up, and he's been one of the best role players in the league for a while. And a million other guys that they've done a similar thing for. So It'll be interesting, man. I mean, if Kawhi decides to stay, then I think you can pencil these guys in for being at least, if not title contenders, if you think they can't beat the Warriors, then at least like the third best team in the league for a decent amount of time, because if anything, they'll just be so good on defense through Kawhi, DeJounte, and whoever else that they'll just be really good. And then when you have a player like Kawhi on offense, combined with the fact that either Popovich will be coaching the team or an assistant of Popovich's will be coaching the team, which means you'll have an actual NBA offense, there's no way you're going to be worse than like 13th on offense, you know? So they'll still be good. Now, if he's gone, then this gets very, very interesting, and that's a whole can of worms that is not exactly going away at this point. So we'll just have to see.